All right. Well, today we're going to start a new series. Coming off of the last one is probably a little bit more theological leaning. We're going to kind of take on a new series that's a little more relaxed, a little more life applicable, if you will. So this series is based on a Life Church series of the same name, Habits of a Healthy Heart. And to kick us off, I'm just curious how many people are willing to admit that they've ever told a lie. Have you ever lied about something or yeah? The other day, a friend of mine was telling me about an experience that he's been going through where the people he's been talking to have been lying to him about this and that, and it's mostly been blatant and all this other. And it got me to kind of wondering about the things I might lie about and maybe not even realize it, right? Like just because you don't want to look like the idiot, right? You want to make yourself look a little than what you did, made you look or whatever. Or, maybe you just want to fudge the truth just a little bit. Maybe you didn't want somebody to think bad of you. Maybe you're trying to make something just flat out go your way. Or just make it sound or you know a little better, or something. So it also made me, who would I be willing to lie to? A complete stranger, a friend, um, who? So then, what about you? Uh, answer it. How do you tell me? I mean, if you thought about it, who do you think you lie to the most? Maybe you called in sick to work when you weren't actually sick. I know you farmers do that all the time, right? The kids kept nagging for something, and just to get them to shut up, I'll think about it, even though you weren't going to think about it. What? I'm just no. And that's the downside of these life applications, right? So, uh, when you're even younger and you broke something or whatever, and your reaction was, "It wasn't me," you know. I saw a video online a while back of a guy that was playing with a soccer ball in his house, and he lost control of it, and it hit a shelf full of breakable stuff, and it all just went crashing down. Wife stomping around the corner, he disappeared and left his little kid there to take the heat. Uh, or maybe a friend called you up and asked for help moving or whatever, and you were busy that weekend. Oh, what weekend was it again? Um, and how many people have positive posts on social media about how great things are going when in reality probably going through some pretty tough stuff. Lewis, the perspective, a little lie is like a little pregnancy. It doesn't take long before everyone knows. So who do you think you lie to the most? The surprising truth to that question is that and we talked about this a few months ago, but that most often we so you think about it, maybe there's something that you really want to do or start, like a diet or whatever, and you tell yourself, "Oh, I'm going to start tomorrow," even though you know you won't. You tell yourself that you can stop this thing anytime you want. You're just not ready, even though you won't. You tell yourself that you're fine when you're not. Maybe someone hurts you and you shrug it off and say, I don't care anyway, when in reality it really hurt. But in this passage, Jeremiah speaks about the Hebrew term for the heart is understood a little bit differently than when we say, my heart today. We talk about our hearts or whatever. To the Hebrew readers, when they read about their heart, it's a metaphorically to a person's inner life. So that is their will, their thoughts, their motivations, their emotions. And Jeremiah is addressing human thoughts and feelings when he said this in verse 9. He said, "The heart is deceitful above all and desperately sick. Who can understand it?" our inner self, right? Reasons that we fail when we say that we're going to start tomorrow is because we're focused on changing something external. External habits, external behaviors. And then what happens is my promise to myself becomes a lie because it doesn't happen. So when we think of habits, this is something that, we often think of New Year's resolutions. This is probably something of the year, because everybody's habits at the beginning. This is, same thing, the New Year's resolutions. These good intentions, they fail because we get focused on changing external habits and behavior. This year I'm going to quit procrastinating. I'm going to read my Bible. I'm going to eat better. I'm going to stop yelling at Amy. We're focused on these external behaviors, but in truth, behaviors are born in our inner self, in our heart. And you've probably heard this call to action before. Change your habits. But we often leave off the most important part. If you want to change your habits, if you change your habits, let God change your heart. So let's pray, and we're going to jump into this. God, thank you for loving us and being patient with us, and God, for being the one who we can lean on to change our inner self, to change our heart so that we can be more like you and answer the call on our lives that you've given us. God, I pray this morning that you would speak a special message to us, God, and that you would help us to change our heart. God, give us help in Jesus' name. It's a 5-part series, and it's going to challenge us to develop healthy habits, good habits, by starting in our inner self, in our heart. Focusing on our inner life, as opposed to trying to form good habits by focusing on the external, the things. So over the next 4 weeks, after this week, we're gonna develop these habits. I start by learning when to recognize when less is better, with the habit of simplicity. When your mind won't stop, the habit of solitude. Getting rid of guilt, the habit of sorrow. And not quitting too early, the habit of slow. This week started, what we need to do first is have a little self-examination of our heart, right? So if we continue reading, God jumps in and he says this: I, the Lord, search the heart and test the mind to give every man according to his ways or according to the fruit of his deeds. God searches our inner self, and he knows us. David knew this about God, and that's why he prayed this at the end of Psalm 39. He said, search me. He kind of almost repeats what God says in Jeremiah. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and see if there's a way everlasting. God, search my heart, test my mind, and lead me so my ways are like your ways. So why would David pray this prayer? Over time, David started to realize and understand that he had a propensity to lie to himself, just like we're talking about today. David faced the same problem that we face when we let a little lie slip by. Just as C.S. Lewis said, and we bend the truth, we make it okay to do what we're doing, and it seems insignificant at first, will grow. And the truth can't be hidden any longer. Unfortunately for David, of the pregnancy, the time he realized he was lying to himself, that pregnancy had and born and everything. So when David prayed his heart, test his thoughts and change his ways to be more like God's ways, he was at the low point in his life. And we've talked about the story several times, so too terribly much time on it, but to remind it's rock bottom, turn to 2 Samuel. might remember this pretty quickly. In the out to battle, David and all Israel, and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, Jerusalem. So we've talked about this before. This is the time of year when kings go to war. What does David do? He sends somebody else. And think about all the small little lies that he told himself, I've fought enough. I've got a reputation. I deserve a break. I'm important now, so I need to not put myself in danger. Be safe. Convinces himself that it's okay to stay somewhere, to be somewhere where he's not supposed to be. And one day, he gets tired. If you keep reading the story, he gets tired of sitting on all, and so he decides to go out on his back porch, right? Or he's going, would be like us going on the porch. And while he's out enjoying the air, he sees something. Right, the Hebrew word used there is pronounced. You can't even say that word without bobbing your eyebrows, and that's exactly how I was looking at this woman. Right, and so what lies now? I'm not hurting anybody. Looking, just enjoying God's creation, and then he starts wondering who she is. It can't hurt to find out more about this person. Without some backstory, this is just a book, right? After he learns who she is, he tells himself, or he lies to himself a little more, and he says, I should invite her over. She should come over here, and we could talk. We could be good friends. Learn a little bit more about each other. And maybe he lied to himself some more about being the king, and one more. It's not going to hurt anything. After all, it's just one night, and nobody will know, blah, blah, blah. Except that she ended up getting pregnant. And so now what's he going to do? David's deceptive heart, he keeps pushing this lie further. And he decides to stage this whole thing to look like, came. So in his panic, he sends for her husband Uriah, brings him home. And the problem that David runs into now is that her husband, unlike David, is actually being honorable in this moment. And he refuses to go home and sleep in his own bed and with his wife because he knows his men are out sleeping in the field, fighting. With his wife. And David's in another. So he ratchets this a little bit more. And this little lie just because the only thing he knows, or that he can do, what he thinks he can do, decides to kill. So David goes to the front lines where he's sure to die. The whole story, or violating somebody, he's committing adultery, he wrecks a whole family, he murders somebody, and after all of this, his baby. And so, looking at this story from the outside, you might find yourself one of those people that go to the main character behind them. You may find yourself yelling at David, "What are you doing? Stop, you're going to ruin everything." David never recognized his sin, his mistake. Why? Because we're masters of self-deception. We lie to ourselves all the time. Psychologists have a term for it. They call it cognitive bias. The Bible calls it flattering ourselves, having a deluded heart. In fact, in Psalm 36, it says that sin whispers to wicked people deep within their hearts. And then it says, in their own eyes, they flatter themselves too much to detect or hate their sin. So according to Craig Groeschel, he gives 5 major ways that self-deception can manifest in us. First, he said, we distract ourselves from the truth about ourselves. Addiction to distraction. This happens when we know that we are doing something wrong, unintentionally distracting ourselves by anything that keeps us from facing the truth ourselves. It might be an addiction to social media or to the news or talking bad about other people or whatever. Might it even be something that's even worse, like pornography or alcohol or drugs. It's an addiction that distracts us from facing the truth about ourselves. The second way that it manifests is in a manic cheeriness. You just go around pretending that everything's great, showing this great life on social media, when the truth is that you might actually be depressed or discouraged. You're facing bad stuff in your life, but in public, you make sure that the only thing people hear about you is they hear you, right? Instead of being more of an internal self-deception, they'll target other people. So you may find yourself judging others. We have something wrong with us, but we point out the faults in somebody else. It could be like a deflection. Maybe we point out the speck in their eye when we have a log in our own. Very harshly about the sin in their life. The reality is that we are vulnerable to that very same thing. We judge others, the very thing that we dislike about ourselves. And we're about to see David does this exact thing, or he's at least called out for it. Also be very defensive. It offends us, the suggestion that there might be something. She's the reason. I'm the victim. And finally, our self-deception can convince us that everything is wrong. It's not me. It's something else to blame. It's somebody else's fault. I'm not the one with the problem. Whatever it was that caused David to continue to deceive himself, it tore his life apart. To big ones and ended up hurting and killing people. It ended up hurting David. So by the end, the Lord sent the prophet Nathan to David in chapter 12 of 2 Samuel. And Nathan told David a story about a little lamb and his owner. The other was poor. The poor man had this little lamb and he cherished it. It was like a child to him. He loved it. He always took care of it. And one day the rich man was entertaining company and he didn't want to kill one of his animals, so he sends for this poor man's lamb. And this made David furious. And he says, that's the worst thing I've ever heard. That man should be punished. He deserves death. He should be put to death. And then Nathan looked at David and said in Hebrew, which is, you are that man. So if you want to change your life, you have to start changing your habits. And if you want to change your habits, you have to let God change. So along with the self-deception manifest in our hearts, it also gives 3 warning signs that we can look for. And I thought these were good, so I wanted to share them. 3 warning signs we can look for where we may be deceiving ourselves. And if David is looking and noticed signs that God put in his heart, he may have avoided all of this horrible mess. And this is the crazy part. This is the tough part, I should say. It's not easy. It's not easy to invite God in to search your heart and to know your mind and to change you and make your ways more like His, to lead you in ways lasting. First thing, Craig says, is that you should watch for what others have tried to tell you. Somebody else. 2 people have told you that you have a problem, it might be time to pause and to do a little self-examination like we're talking about today. Time to pray and ask God to make it clear to you. Guys, if your spouse, then that counts as two, right? Anyway. If she tells you twice, then you might have a real big problem. No, I'm just kidding. So when you ask God to search your heart, watch out, because he might send somebody. He might send a Nathan into your life to tell you. He might send a Nathan into your life to tell you a farming story. Second, watch for what you rationalize. It's shocking how good that we can be at rationalizing, right? Watch out for when you say, it's no big deal, it's not hurting anybody. If you catch, stop. I can handle it. I don't have a problem. Rationalizing, it sounds like such a small and insignificant thing. In David's cause, it turned a king away. King that has been called a man after God's own heart. So watch out for what others are telling you. Watch out for what you rationalize. And third, watch out for where you are the most defensive. What do you get defensive about? When somebody says they think you have a problem with something, do you immediately get frustrated? Do you snap back and react? I don't have a problem. Leave me alone. This is your business. A devotional book you may have heard of called My Utmost for His Highest. Oswald Chambers writes this. When we see hypocrisy, deceit, and a lack of genuineness in others is that they are all in our own hearts. Most of us are much more severe in our judgment of others than we are in judging ourselves, like we talked about a little bit ago. We make excuses for ourselves while we condemn things in others simply because we are not naturally inclined to do them. In other words, what he's kind of saying here is that we go easy on ourselves and we hold others to a higher standard. Craig Groeschel says it this way: the more convinced you are that you don't have a problem, the more likely it is that you do. God wants to lead you in his ways, in the way everlasting. Your heart so that you can develop healthy habits. But here's the bottom line.